Barbers, what was your oh crap moment? So, my coworker at a salon was cutting a girl's hair and found lice. The girl's mom had left her for the trim, and she had to wait for her mom in the lobby. We spent the next hour or so frantically cleaning around all of the other clients and stylists to sanitize the whole place top to bottom. When the mom came back and asked her why she didn't have her hair cut, she replied, "They found what? Seriously, who brings their lice-ridden child to the salon?" Next story. The typical not a barber here, but I used to go to a local barber college to get my hair cut before it was cheap. One girl had never cut a white guy's hair, and her teacher asked if I was okay with it. I said sure, she has to learn somehow, and it's just hair, it can be shaved and it should grow back. Told her how I wanted the haircut. Pretty simple, a little short and off the ears. Jokingly said, "Do not take my ears off." Well, long story short, I left with a bald head and a band-aid on the top of my left ear, after bleeding like a stuck pig due to blood thinners, where she nicked me with the scissors. Even her teacher couldn't save the haircut. I did my best to try and help the girl calm down as she was ugly crying. Went back a month later and asked if the girl was there, and thankfully she was, and I simply said, "Round 2. And she did it perfect the second time around. Next story. Not seeing a lot of actual barbers in this thread, probably because a lot of these sort of stories will make you look like a bad barber, but oh well. Here's a collection of my oh crap stories from my 8 years in the industry. Beauty school. This tweaker dude and his hippie girlfriend come in for $7 haircuts. Immediately seemed something was off about the girlfriend. She seemed a little not all there and was cross-eyed and had dreads poking out of her hippie hat. The appointments were a bit staggered, so I finished the guy's one all-over buzz cut, and my classmate calls me over to help with hers. When she took off the girl's hat, her hair was completely matted and filthy, and beneath the matted hair were stinking, suppurating sores covering her scalp. When we combed at the hair, her scalp would begin to give and split away wetly. We called over an instructor who tried to explain that we couldn't service someone who was literally oozing, and she didn't seem to understand, and they left without paying. I will never forget that smell. Then another time at beauty school, when bang trims go poorly. If you cut even slightly too high and a cowlick in the front goes boing and springs the hair right up off the face, there's literally no coming back from a bad bang trim. To be fair, if it was that important, she shouldn't have been having students doing it. This also applies to colors. Local teenage girls would come in expecting a full head of highlights and then be shocked and angry when it goes poorly and takes forever, and there's huge lines near the root. Arguments between 17-year-old clients and 19-year-old jailbird beauty school girls were really common. Another story, lice. I've had 3 run-ins with lice on kids in my 8 years of cutting hair. You just gotta stop cutting immediately. Discreetly, send them back to their parents and spend the next hour cleaning and feeling crawly. And also, discovering something like lice is like the classic oh crap moment in haircutting. Then another one. Years ago, I was working at a shop in SF's Tenderloin. I was standing near the window, looking absent-mindedly outside, and this drugged-out woman on the corner decides that I was looking at her. So she shambles into the shop, right up to the station, and starts threatening me, inches from my face. I become acutely aware that my razors and shears are sitting in plain view of the counter next to us, and that I have to get them into my possession and away from her before she can use them against me. I decided that if I'd had to stab a crackhead in self-defense, I'd use my trusty 8-inchers. But before it gets to that, my coworkers intervene, and one coworker begins corralling her outside. At the doorway, she starts swinging and punches one of the coworkers in the face and bites the other on the chest. Cops showed up pretty quickly and arrested her about a block away. I spent another year at that shop constantly looking over my shoulder, certain that she'd one day reappear. Then, and I've got 2 more guys, one dude had passed out after a haircut. Based on what he told me, he had some sort of sensory issues, and the combination of heat, the neck strip, clipper buzzing, and noise of the shop overwhelmed him. If you've ever dealt with a person fainting, you know what an oh crap moment it is. One moment dude is standing up and looking a little worried, next he is crumpling to the floor. I'm a little guy, but I was able to sort of catch him and ease him down without anyone getting hurt. And it was pretty scary. My first thought was that I somehow killed him. And then finally, in my personal worst story, I was cutting one of my regulars' hair, and he always insisted on scissor over comb instead of clippers on the side, which is fine and kind of my thing anyhow. I was working in the lower right corner of his nape, moving upwards with my big-ass 8-inch dry-cutting scissors, and he sort of twisted towards me to say something at the precise moment that my shears closed, causing me to close the pivot of my shears right onto the flesh atop of his ear. And it wasn't like a little common nick. I felt my tools puncture living flesh. The whole top chunk was like hanging off and bleeding profusely. My coworkers said I looked pale and panicked, and I still don't know how I did it. But I managed to get the ear chunk back in place with surgical glue and staunch the bleeding with talcum powder. And the craziest part is, he kept coming back to see me, insisted on paying full price plus tip, and continued coming back until he moved away a year later. About 5 years later, not a day goes by at work where I don't think about the sickening sensation of metal and flesh, and I'm happy to say nobody has been hurt since. Next story. My dad let me line myself up once, effed up, decided to cut the whole thing off and go bald. The plus side to being black is that 99% of the time, being bald looks fine. So I guess I was part of the 1% that looks like effing Whopper ball candy. Next story. Not me, but my mom, who is a hairdresser. Did you know that some hair dye chemicals don't play well together? Turns out the lady had used some sort of hair dye chemical that basically has tiny bits of metal in it. She didn't mention that. My mom goes to dye her hair and puts the professional dye on it, and the hair more or less starts melting as the dye reacts. Her hair was totally ruined. There was no saving it. Only thing to do was to just get the new dye off as fast as possible. She was pretty understanding about the whole situation, though. Next story. The barber my dad took us kids to growing up kept a plastic ear in a big glass jar of water. Told all of the little kids jokingly that it was the ear of a little boy who wouldn't sit still when getting a haircut, and he accidentally cut the kid's ear off. Said he was keeping it in formaldehyde, air quotes, to remind us all to be very still. It largely had the desired effect on the younger kids. Next story. I'm not a licensed barber or professional by any means, but I have been cutting my own hair for about 10 years. I'm really good at it. Save a lot of time and money, know exactly how to do it, and never have to worry about getting something I don't like anymore. But it has taken a lot of trial and error over the years, especially when I was learning how to fade. This was 3 years ago. I start cutting like I normally do and start fading my sides. At the top of my head, the guard pops off. Huge effing chunk falls down my face. So me, still learning, not knowing how to fix it, decides it's just best to buzz it, which I really only had to do 3 times in my career. And guys, I look dumb as crap with a buzzed head. So for some unknown reason, I also decide to shave my beard, thinking maybe it'll equal all out. Nope. Apologies if this offends anyone, but I look like I'm receiving chemo at this point. Bro, I looked like a thumb. Big toe looking ass. And so I hated myself, and my wife still makes fun of me to this day. I got endless crap from my family and was attached to a hat for like 2 months. This was the moment that made me never F up again. All right, everyone, so I kind of relate to this story, as I'm sure we've all been through or are going through. In your 20s, it's about discovery and who you are, and that was kind of me with facial hair. I would do a bunch of different styles, nothing too crazy, but for a brief time, I had friendly mutton chops. Look it up. Not regular mutton chops like Wolverine or something. The friendly ones where they meet in the middle. And I posted it on my Instagram story, and y'all, that was the most divisive thing I have ever seen from my friends. It was either the coolest, best thing I did, or the stupidest, ugliest, worst thing I did. You went outside like that? Yes. You went outside like that? Yes, I did. Some days I kind of miss it, and maybe one day I'll bring it back, but having friendly mutton chops was kind of awesome during my facial hair experimentation phase. Anyway, next story. All right, so not a barber, but my cousin worked in a salon when I was a kid, and I would hang out there a lot after school. One day, she cuts a guy's head pretty bald with the clippers. Lots of blood, but it wasn't too serious. This led to them dating, and eventually getting married. Next story. Oh, geez. I've been barbering for 7 years, and I got a couple of stories. Mostly communication errors. I had a client come in with a super tight haircut, looked like it had just been cut, and asked for a 0 on the sides. Now, I'm not sure what this guy was on, but 0 is bald to me. So I start my bald line for my fade, and he freaks out that it's way too short and I ruined his haircut. Since this never happens to me, I got super upset and felt absolutely terrible. I've had clients who text me and ask for an appointment, and then I forget to book it. Then they show up and I'm busy and they don't have an appointment. I always comp them because I feel terrible. And I used to work in a low-income neighborhood and worked at a black barber shop. I was cutting a kid's hair, and since it was so curly, you couldn't see his scalp or anything. Started cutting into it, and sure enough, he had ringworm. I have hella stories, but those are just the ones that come to mind. Next story. While I was training at a pretty chic salon in London, there was a kid who came in for a cut with his mom. She was a regular, the typical bi-weekly blow-dry client that was always dressed in the finest fineries and sent her kid to private school. Now he sat down in my colleague's chair, and the mom gave a fairly detailed and particular instruction of a short back and sides, as if my colleague had never heard of a haircut before. Then she sat down in the waiting area and picked up a magazine and began reading. This kid, though, was a little crap. He squirmed and complained the entire time. My colleague, bless her, was very diplomatic and tried to be firm but fair to this kid. She was very experienced at this point and dealt with a fair share of spoiled children. Then, towards the end of the cut, she very clearly told the boy to stay still as she was cutting the stray hairs around his ears, and she told him that her scissors had just been sharpened and it would hurt a lot if she cut him. He agreed to keep his head still. However, as previously stated, this boy was a little crap. He suddenly turned his head to something and she caught the top of his ear. Now, she wasn't lying about getting her scissors sharpened, and those things are hella sharp when they are. I will never forget the top bit of his ear just resting on the blades of her scissors and her wide-eyed, pale expression of realization of what had happened. I don't know if you've ever cut an ear, but those things bleed. At this point, the mother puts down her magazine, puts her thunder face on, and stormed over to my colleague's section with the screaming and bleeding child in it. Wordless, she raised her arm with an open hand and slapped the kid straight in the face. "That'll teach you for not listening!" And the whole salon was in complete shock. She pulled him by the arm and dragged him out of the salon without a word to anyone else. We never saw them again. Absolutely the most mental experience of working in a salon. That and the crazy color change I had to do. But that's a story for another time. Next story. I was in school still at the time and was cutting this guy's hair. He brought his girlfriend along and she was watching like a hawk over me. I'm halfway through the cut and almost done with the fade when the person next to me has their trolley too close to me, so I go to move it, but I didn't pay attention that my other hand had the clipper still running with no guard on. I made a nasty line through the fade that didn't look intentional at all and was sweating my ass off on how I was going to fix this. The girlfriend, of course, points it out, and the client is actually super chill about it and has me basically just rung up a super high 0.5 on the sides and back. 3 years later, and to this day, I haven't had an incident that bad. Next story. Brother of a barber who used to be a hair model. Does that count? Back when I used to have a good head of hair, his instructor told a story during one of the shows about a mobster falling asleep during a shave. While shaving him, he accidentally cut off a mole, and he said he kept putting on towels onto him and then snuck across the street and hid in a bar watching through the window until the mobster left. Since he was only renting the chair in the shop, he grabbed all of his stuff and found another place to work after he was sure the mobster was gone. Next story. When I was a little kid and hid under the table with a pair of scissors to cut my own bangs, my mom screamed when she saw my work. I remember doing it by feel. Didn't even have a mirror, but I don't remember how it looked. Ironically, a few years later, my mom tried to trim my bangs and she did a horrible job. I had to wear a hat for a while. Next story. Barber here. I'm pretty experienced and a successful barber with my own place, but I definitely have made some mistakes along the way. This story still makes me die inside just a little bit. So, when I was training, maybe a few months in, so I had a bit of confidence, enough for me to not realize I still didn't know what I was doing, I was cutting this guy's hair and I got to his fringe. He wanted it really short and I was standing in front of him cutting along his forehead whilst chatting away. I took my scissors away to comb his hair, but flicked them around my fingers and they swung around and hit the guy right in the effing iris. I froze. He froze. Eventually, I asked him, "Did I just hit you in the eye, by the way?" And he said, "I think so," trying to act like it wasn't sore for some reason. It eventually blew up in the shop once his shock wore off, and someone else got him out the door. Found out a month later, his wife was a nurse and she had used some kind of eye drop and his eye was only scratched. Thank God, because I thought I blinded him. I gave him a free haircut next time. Just the one, though. Alright guys, as I'm sure you know, I'm not a barber, I'm a voice actor, but if you stick around till the end or later towards the end of the video, I will share with you the story of my worst haircut ever. It was so bad, I didn't even want to take a picture to commemorate it. So that's the reward for sticking around this time. But anyway, let's continue. Next story. So I had gotten a last-minute interview for a job, so I asked if she could cut my hair. She didn't have any experience in cutting hair, but I figured she would do a better job than me. We went out to the backyard, and I don't know if the sun was in her eyes or if she was just nervous, but as soon as I saw the first snip she had taken from the front, I knew she had cut too much off. She took a step back and looked like she was about to burst burst into tears, and I assured her that it was okay because there was nothing that could be done about it except try not to get any shorter. She did finish up, and the end result, it was kind of goofy looking, but I wasn't too upset. I knew it would grow out, and I really appreciated her doing that. And although I kept thanking and reassuring her it was okay, it took at least a day before she fully believed I was okay with it. Had it been a professional, I probably would have been more upset. But everyone makes mistakes, and a bad haircut is only temporary. Next story. Not the barber in this story, but my younger sister was. This story happened about 38 years ago, so I'm recalling as best as I can remember. Among our friend group was a very sweet young man who we would call Bubba. A little heavy and not the sharpest tool in the shed, but a sweet, good-hearted guy. Bubba's hair hung in his face, which drove Sissy nuts. We should note that he had a huge crush on Sissy. So one evening, we were sitting around my parents' dining room table playing spades. That's a card game. As always, Bubba's hair was hanging over his eyes. Sissy was practically twitching, watching him brush it away every 30 seconds. Finally, she spoke up and said, "Bubba, you need a haircut. Let me just trim your bangs." Of course, he immediately agreed. Scissors and a towel were quickly tracked down, and Sissy started clipping. It was uneven and kind of patchy. This isn't going well. Then one of the genius friends spoke up and said, "It ain't even." But I got an idea. Don't trim anymore for a minute. Dude pulls my mom's biscuit mixing bowl out of the cupboard and plonks it onto poor Bubba's head. "There, just cut straight across." And she did. And then she cut straight across the back. The oh crap moment happened when Sissy took the bowl off of Bubba's head, and we realized she had given poor Bubba a literal bowl cut. He looked like the Dutch boy paint kid's pothead cousin. Next story. So basically, I really wanted to meet this local judge who was like a real high flyer in the community. I managed to invite him to my barbershop for a free haircut, and one day, out of nowhere, he just turned up for a trim. I was like, oh crap, internally obviously, and then I murdered him and had my neighbor bake him into a pie. Is this from a movie or a TV show or something? I feel like this is from a reference to something that I haven't seen. So feel free to elaborate in the comments if you would like to. Also, about last story, do you guys ever watch Dr. K? His hair, he brushes it away every 5 seconds. I'm so glad he got a haircut recently. Anyway, next story. So, when I was like 5, I decided to steal the kitchen scissors, give myself a haircut, and then hide the hair in a toy purse. Once I realized what I looked like, I went up to my mom and told her I needed to go get another haircut, and you can imagine her reaction. Next story. I was the client in this situation. My hairstylist was doing a usual cut on me, and when she was cutting around one of my ears, her scissors caught onto the top inch or so of the cartilage, like the actual top part of the ear, and she kept cutting harder and trying to get this thick hair knot cut. It took me saying "ow" for her to realize she was cutting my ear. No blood, no cut, just a really bendy ear. You see, she was distracted talking to my mom since I was like in middle school at the time, and she never stopped saying it every time I get my hair done. Hasn't happened since either. Next story. My mother is a barber. She was tasked with cutting my husband's hair for our wedding. The guard comb thing that goes on an electric razor, it popped off while she was enthusiastically speaking to me. She accidentally buzzed a 0 on the back of his head. A 0 is the shortest you can cut the hair without it being bald, I believe. And we never told him, and no pictures were taken on the back of his head. If I can help it, I'll be taking this to my grave. If not, he'll forgive me, but I'll still feel bad. Next story. Not a barber, but within the first 2 weeks of COVID lockdowns, my boredom mixed with ADHD impulses brought me to think shaving my head was a great idea. And I also convinced my brother to do it with me, because why not? For him, okay. For me, big mistake. Firstly, I do not have the best hairline, which I underestimated because once the top was gone, that crap was pulling graph functions on my forehead. F and Y equals you effed up, head ass. I should also mention, I am very skinny, so mix the shaved head with that, and I looked like I was on chemo. In conclusion, good learning experience, but never again. Next story. Been a professional barber for 2 years now. I like to tell my clients this story all the time, but it is the first time writing it, so bear with me. When I was in barber school, I had a mother and her son come in to get a haircut for her son. They did not speak English very well, so there was a bit of a language barrier. She told me she wanted a 2 on top, which is very short, 1/4 of an inch left to be exact, and the little boy had close to 3 inches on the top, so I figured they did not understand the lengths. I did try to explain to her that the 2 would be very short by showing her the guard, but she insisted he got a 2 on top. Being the dumbass I was, I started clipping down the middle of the kid's head. And I remember hearing the clipper take off a bunch of hair, and the child knew something was wrong and started screaming. Oh crap. The mother came over and scolded me for taking it too short. She told me that she wanted 2 inches left, not a number 2 guard. I apologized like 5 times and told them I would at least make the buzz cut look good and get them a free haircut next time. As I was finishing up the kid's hair, literally on the last pass with my clippers, by an act of God or something, the guard I was using popped off and I went straight to skin down the middle of the top of the poor child's head. Oh crap! I put my hand over the bald patch on this kid's head and just pretended that nothing happened. Thankfully, one of my instructors came by and I was able to flag him down for some assistance. I took my hand off the kid's head and my instructor started chuckling a little and told me to go in the back and get some water while he sorts things out. He ended up getting into a big fight with the mother because she thought I did it on purpose for yelling at me earlier, but it was an accident. And she did come to a school and pay $5 for a student haircut. The TLDR is, took a child's hair way too short, tried to make it look good, went even shorter than I had already had on accident, hid in the back while instructor argues with mother about whether or not I did it on purpose. Next story. Not a professional, but I have 2 stories that somewhat relate to each other. When I was in high school, my mom would try to save money by cutting my hair herself. When she was about to finish, she saw a part she needed to fix and grabbed the clippers, forgetting she'd already taken the guard off and gave me a bald spot at my hairline at the top of my forehead. Crap was traumatic. Fast forward 9 years to about 5 months ago, COVID is in full swing. People can't really get haircuts from barbers, and a friend of mine needed a haircut. And she was willing to trust me. Basically, all she wanted was the sides to be cut at a 3. I told her my incident with my mom getting my hair and that I would never let that happen to her. Then, I noticed the guard on the counter and I started crying. Next story. I'm not a barber, but twice in my life I've had someone cutting my hair legit gasp and put their hand to their mouths, then try to cover the shock and strike kind of a pensive, "How's that looking?" face. Now, I don't blame the first guy, even though I had warned him. I told my neighbor my beard trimmer was deceptively small when he showed up to trim me, and informed me his ex-roommate had stolen his clippers. With the first line down the middle, he knew. After a couple of more, he told me he thought we should stop, but I told him it was too late, and he'd given me the monk. Now, the second was at an actual barber shop. They were younger dudes who prided themselves on being classic before it was cool. They had a keg and they'd offer you a drink no matter the time of day. Not sure how I didn't see this as a red flag back then. And I had had my hair cut there a few times and I enjoyed it. That is until I had my first afternoon cut. And one move in, the barber immediately gasped. And well, you know the rest. He managed to prevent the Buddha cut, but only barely. And then, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I know this post is more than long enough already, but I just remembered one more. And this guy was the biggest effing a-hole of all of them. Me. It was my 25th birthday, and without going into detail, this is long enough already, but withholding all exaggeration, it was the worst effing birthday of my life. Somewhere between being way too drunk and incredibly sad, I decided to cut my own hair. Back then, I was crazy poor and did this a few times prior to the night in question, but never so drunk though. I had a job interview that I couldn't afford to do poorly on in the next day, and at first, everything was going fine. But then, when I went to touch a little bit of hair on the side of my head, I sipped and buzzed, and I took a whole razor-side chunk out. Fun fact was using same clippers as in story 1, but despite the poor decisions, the buzz in my hair, the hangover, and reeking of booze, I got the job. Next story. Not me, but my mom. She's been doing hair for 40 plus years, and last Friday, she had a new customer who was so unhappy with how her hair turned out, she called out of work that day while still in the chair. My mom, she gave up her Saturday off to fix it, but the lady is coming back in 2 weeks, so we'll see if that happens again. In the meantime, my mom's stressing that this lady truly hated her hair that much, and it's the first time anything like this has ever happened to her. Next story. Hairdresser of 12 years. I once was combing a young girl's hair that had just got her cartilage pierced a few days prior. Sure enough, I snug it in the comb and ripped the barbell straight through the ear. I went physically weak at the knees and cried a bit. It bled a ton, but she was, and is, the kindest client I've ever had. She refused to not pay me and never told any of her family, whom are all my clients as well, what happened. Still though, I cringe at this moment to this day. Next story. When my brother got his first haircut in a barber shop, he of course was a bit nervous as he never had his haircut before. My mom assured him that it would be okay and that it wasn't painful. Well, the barber accidentally cut off my brother's earlobe. So that was a real oh crap moment for all parties, I believe. Next story. My mom, she has a doodle that requires regular trims. One day, she tells me the groomer is incompetent. Mom goes on to say that she took it into her own hands to repair the hideous chop job her baby was sporting. She starts to laugh. She can barely talk. She's laughing so hard as she says, I think I owe the groomer an apology. And she presents her fluff baby, and it is sporting a dozen bald patches, a lopsided mustache, and a rat tail. Next story. A little late to the party here. Not a barber, but a submarine sailor. Inevitably, someone on the boat has to take the role of barber. Very early on, I figured out that if I cut hair, I could gain favor with people around me. Now, first few hundred haircuts went surprisingly smooth, and I gained a reputation for being good enough to get a cut for the wife. I had a waiting list, worked after hours, even spent money on some professional gear. Now it's a week before we get home from our long underway. Guys are lining up to get dolled up for their reunions. This older guy sits down, asks for a simple cut, buzz the top to a 5, and skin fade the sides. I start on my first pass on the top, clippers cut through his greasy hair with ease. Boat rolls and I compensate. I'm almost done with the top and going for my final pass right down the middle, and as I reach the front and shift to pull the clippers back, two things happen simultaneously. The man sneezes and the guard flies off. The microsecond in between causes a perfect bald patch an inch behind his hairline. I handed him a 10 as an IOU for the fix-up that he'll have to get in a few weeks. Next story. Not a barber, but my best mate and I went to a wedding a few years ago, and in between the ceremony and reception, we had 6 hours to kill and decided to get a haircut to look good for the reception. It was a hot summer's afternoon. We were next to each other in the chair, and the barber cuts her finger almost off while she's cutting my mate's hair. The tip is dangling and blood spurting everywhere. My mate is screaming and the barber's freaking out. He's got someone else's blood on his hand and I'm sitting there watching saying, "Oh crap!" We leave with half-finished haircuts and without paying as they rushed us out to close and go tend to the barber. And then we go to the recreant and have a great time. Next story. Not a barber, but I was getting my hair done once when all hell broke loose. This girl with extremely long hair past her butt came in for a haircut. Barber asked her how long she wanted her hair. There was a miscommunication. The barber heard that she wanted it to cut to the middle of her back. She later said she just wanted it trimmed. So someone misheard or she lied for a free cut. Either way, a few minutes later, she started crying because he cut off a good foot of her hair on one side. She ran out of the salon, crying, was outside on the phone in panic mode, and they had her come back after an hour, and the master stylist finished the cut. Either way, I feel bad for her. Next story. I used to cut my flatmate's hair in my uni halls. My mate and myself taught ourselves from YouTube videos and a lot of trial and error. One day, I was cutting one of the guy's hair, let's call him Jake, but I didn't have my clippers. Jake, not his real name, had a set of beard trimmers which had a pseudo guard you could use. I figured it was better than nothing. Proceeded to give him a 3 back and sides and a club cut on top. Jake wanted his 3 blended down into a 1 at the bottom. Yep, no problem, all done. Until I noticed that due to the style of the guard on his beard trimmers, every time Jake put his head back while I was cutting, it had left a line in his hair. I ended up having to give him a 0 undercut all the way around, which looked quite sick in fairness, but Jake never came to me for a haircut again. Next story. When I was in beauty school, I had a guy come in with beautiful shoulder-length California surfer hair. He said an inch all over. I was like, wow, that's a big change. You sure you want to do all that? And he was like, yeah, that's what I always do. I figured he was one of those guys that gets 1 or 2 haircuts a year. So I put my 8 guard on my clippers and went right up the middle. He looked like I murdered him and started screaming at me. So I grabbed an instructor to finish the haircut. Turns out he wanted an inch off all over. That's when I learned the value of communication. Then, the other big mistake I made was more of a happy accident. The day I got my barber's kit, I came home and told my stepdad I was going to cut his hair. He was like, okay, no problem. So, I'm doing his cut when he asked how I knew what guard to use. My answer, what's a guard? And I shaved his head fully as there was no way to make that big of a patch of a 0 blend with his comb over. At church that week, all of his friends told him how much better he looked with a buzz over a comb over, and they all told him the same thing at work. It's been 14 years now, and he still keeps a 1 all over. Next story. I'm a little late to the party. Student barber. One of my very first cuts, which I should add I had never cut hair before I went to school, was an older gentleman. This gentleman had bushy, wild eyebrow hair, so my instructor asked me to clean it up for him. Trimmer over comb was how she instructed it. I was nervous and shaky, and my hand slipped, and I came literally within centimeters of his eyelid with the trimmer blade, and I gasped, pulled it back, half expecting to see a bloody, blinded eye, but he was totally fine. Thought I cut off his eyebrow, though. But I finished the service without cutting him, and I went on with my day. Next story. I was a hairstylist for 17 years. In the mid-90s, 2 brothers walk in. One about 17 or so, the other about 10. 17-year-old leaves, my friend gets the 10-year-old. Asks him what he wants, and he says, a mohawk, he says. A mohawk, are you sure? Yes, says the kid, and he gets a mohawk. 17-year-old brother comes back and is visibly confused seeing his brother with a mohawk. "Why did you get a mohawk?" he asks. And little brother says, "I asked for a mohawk and I got this." And the older brother says, "No, you were supposed to ask for a bowl cut." So the younger one forgot to say the right name and got a completely different haircut. Of course, this was when bowl cuts were popular. Next story. Not a barber, but I once joked with the stylist that she could just take it all off. She started with a zero blade in the middle, and she saw the horrified look on my face and stopped to ask if she should stop. Well, not with a 3-inch divot in the middle of my head. Yeah, don't joke with barbers. Next story. A hairdresser I know related the story of doing a blue rinse set woman hair. While she was pulling the hair back, she saw this obscenely large pinky white area opening up before her eyes. You see, the woman's recent facelift glue had given away. The client was completely oblivious. Much consternation from the staff followed, though handled well enough to keep the customer, but not something I would ever want to face. Next story. It happened to me as a person who wanted his hair cut. The barber was cutting normally, holding a scissor and snipping the hair until I heard an "oh crap" in Arabic. Then I looked in the mirror and half of my ear was cut. My dad was there with me, so we rushed to the hospital and they fixed it. And I was quite young, 6 years old, so I don't remember how they fixed it, but they did. Crap was traumatizing. Next story. I was at barber school and a mother came in dragging her son by the hair, demanding for someone to give him a baldy. When no one was willing because he was crying, she got mad and threw a nearby barber's equipment on the floor and proceeded to whip him with a belt in front of like 30 barber students, 3 instructors, and the 2 co-owners. Some of the barber students who got their crap thrown on the ground then tried to fight the lady. I think everyone there who wasn't trying to fight the lady had an "oh crap" moment. Then she got thrown out by one of the instructors, but she came back about 2 hours later with a chair and a brand new pair of Walmart clippers. She knocked on the windows and started shaving his head outside the store. Next story. Oh, so many. Once had a teenage boy playing with himself under the cape while I was using the clippers on his neckline. Oh crap. Then, another time, tried to clean up the hairline around an old farmer's ear. Peeled back the ear to reveal a stench that must have been from years of filth growing between his ear and his head. It was brown and looked like actual crap. Probably a centimeter thick it was. Oh crap. Then one time, when I was in an apprenticeship, I accidentally nicked a mole with my scissors. That bled really bad. Oh crap. Then, when I first learned how to cut hair, I gave my mom a haircut and she went from having shoulder-length hair to a number 3 clip all over because I stuffed it up so bad and just kept going shorter. Mom cried, so did I. Oh crap. And so many more moments that I can think of as well, but never a dull day in the salon. Next story. Okay, in the 11 years I've been doing hair, here's what I've experienced. A Polish plate, basically a gigantic dreadlock. All the hair was matted together and smelled terrible. I had to cut that small animal off of her head. It wasn't intentional, but she had health issues for 10 years, and I was very sensitive to her situation until the lady beside her said, "Good Lord, woman, when's the last time you brushed your hair?" Then I had to go into the back to have a little laugh, but seriously, the smell was the worst. I actually had a post that went to the front page 8 years back when it happened. It was a different account that I forgot the password to, but I had pics in that post. Then a man who washed his hair only when he got a haircut. He came to me only 2 times a year. The smell of the oil was sickening, and he had dandruff. Oh my, he had so much dandruff. 6 months worth. I was the only person in the shop who could stomach doing his hair. I washed it 6 times or more, and I wish we wore masks then. Then there's men who self-pleasure themselves under their cape. Please stop doing that. There was the man who recorded us and took photos. My manager at the time went outside and looked through the window behind him to see what he was doing. He was zooming in on our body parts. He was asked to delete everything and to leave. His wife came in angry and yelled at us. One girl's husband called the guy and cussed him out, and I don't know how he got his number. Then another time, I did a lady's hair for her husband's funeral. She sat quietly and wept the whole time, and I had to hide my face because I kept crying with her. That was hard. Shaved a woman's head who ultimately died from breast cancer. She didn't cry. I promised her I wouldn't, and when she left, I cried in the back. And that's all I can remember now, but I'm sure there's more. Next story. I have 2 stories, both about other people though. First is one of my male teachers who had a pretty nice hairstyle, short as in not going past his neck, but pretty long and full. Then one day he comes in with basically a buzz cut, and I'm thinking, okay, but I don't say anything. Then class starts, and I think one of the other students asked what happened, so he goes, "I asked for 2 inches off the top, and they thought I said 2 inches on the top." So yeah, it took a few months to grow back to its original length. The other is about my nephew. My sister was cutting his dad's hair and put down the scissors by the sink while using the razor. My nephew somehow grabbed the scissors and cut into his hair. He was fine, but a noticeable strand was missing, leaving a hole in his hair. So my sister had to give him a buzz cut to even it out. He loved it though because it felt prickly, and he's never done it with normal scissors though, but we think he might have thought since this was for hair cutting, he can cut his hair with it. I don't know, 3-year-olds, man. Next story. I worked at a prestigious salon in an affluent neighborhood of Atlanta. While I was shampooing a client's hair, a roach fell from the open rafter ceiling right into the shampoo bowl. I had to finish washing her hair without freaking out as to not cause a scene, but I was not graceful about it by any means, but I managed to keep the client from finding out about it. When we were done, I tried to contain the demon roach by covering it with a towel and ran to the back to get the salon assistant/maintenance man to take care of the problem. Good times. Next story. Stylist here. After graduating, I did an advanced master's program, which was an additional year of training. On my last day for my test out, we had 6 very specific requirements we needed. My 6th model shows up for a color service and she has several sores on her head. I'm freaking out, it looked like scabies, and I cannot perform a chemical service on her. I go to the instructor and he's like, well, I guess you're gonna fail. So I send the client packing and I run outside. It's a major downtown city and I start running up to people on the street asking if I can color their hair. And I end up paying a homeless woman $30 to let me color her hair. Mid-service, she goes to the bathroom and ends up overdosing with color in her hair. We have to call an ambulance to come get her, and there's hair color and urine all over the bathroom that I have to clean up. The woman was okay, and I saw her last week in the same spot as before. After all that, I technically didn't have a model to submit, but thankfully, I still passed. Next story. I've not worked as a hairdresser for a good few years now, but I still cut my husband's hair. Thankfully, this happened when I was cutting his hair, and this happened in December of last year. So I had been meaning to cut his hair for a couple of weeks, but things just kept getting in the way, but one night we were both sick of putting it off and got down to business. It was around 1 a.m. at this point. I was tired and wanted to go to bed, but there was no effing way we were putting it off any longer. So got the clippers and the guards out and laid them out on the bathroom counter. Put the first guard on the clippers when my husband reminded me I should probably oil the blade. Okay, cool, took the guard off, oiled those bad boys off, and off I go. And oh crap, I forgot to put the effing guard back on. So there it is, a big whooping bald patch in my husband's hair. Me hysterically laughing, but also crying and profusely apologizing from guilt, and my husband completely unimpressed at the whole thing. I didn't know whether to just give up and call it a night or attempt to salvage the absolute disaster that I had created. I ended up trying to see what I could do with it, but it was just so short, there was absolutely nothing that could be done unless we were to completely shave the whole lot off. Luckily, he works from home, so he could hide away until it got to a length where it could be blended, and he was supposed to be going into work for a couple of days after that, but of course, told them hell no and told all of his coworkers about my enormous F-up. And I would say, lesson learned. Don't cut hair late at night when you're tired, but I've literally just finished up cutting his hair at midnight before I opened Reddit and I saw this post. I always check, double check, and triple check those little effers before going in now. Never again. Got a great picture though, and a story to tell people, so I guess that's good. Next story. Not a barber, but I was once in an inpatient rehab for a few months, and they would take us to get haircuts at the local barber college every few weeks. My hair had been growing out from neglect, and I had a big beard. I decided to let them clean me up a little bit. Well, my first red flag should have been that all of the practice mannequins were black and had very outdated 80s-looking black men's hairstyles. My hair was past shoulder length, think homeless rocker, and I am super white. The next red flag was my barber absolutely reeked of weed. Not cool when giving haircuts to a bunch of people in rehab, so he started razoring my beard, and I was kind of excited because I had never gotten a shave like that before. I should also mention that without my glasses, I'm near legally blind, so I actually had to ask him to stop so that I could check out the progress. And he managed to turn my glorious beard into a crappy, super thin chin strap, and my mustache was like pencil thin also, and it's usually very full. I looked like riffraff. And my rocker long hair? I guess this guy had only cut women's hair at that length because he somehow took it off my shoulders, but then it started curling out like Cat Williams. There was nothing I could do but endure the laughter and the druggy buggy all the way back to the facility, where I promptly shaved off everything. Next story. I'm not a barber, but I went to this barber to get my beard trimmed one time. It was pretty quiet and I was the only customer. While I was getting my my beard trimmed, a bloke walked in, and I assumed he was one of the barbers that worked there because he went straight to the other two barbers who had no customers, and you could tell straight away that they were happy to see him, like he'd done something outrageous the last time they'd seen him. So they moved out of my view, but I could clearly hear their conversation. It started with one of the barbers talking to the guy who had just walked in, saying, "Bro, tell me what happened. Did you end up going home with that couple?" And he replies, "Yeah, bro, it was crazy. I was full smashing his missus while he watched." And the two are cracking up, high-fiving and such, and I'm just sitting there trying not to react because I had a cutthroat blade at my throat. But then directly after he said, "And then he started sucking my wang and it was wild, man. Best threesome I ever had." And I was pretty shocked. I was offered the hot towel but decided to skip it and paid my dues and left to never return, even though they had done a great job on my beard. I later thought maybe it was a gee-up because they were bored or something, but it was awkward, and I had a good laugh telling my missus and mates at work about it. Next story. Well, I'm not the barber, but I was chilling with my friends when my mom came in and said, "I got someone to cut your hair for you." So I followed her, but we didn't get in the car. I then saw this one lady walking up to us saying she was a barber, and my mom trusted her. So we went upstairs to a room under construction and tells me to sit in this old, dusty chair, and then asks how I want my hair done. I tell her I just want it short on the sides and a little trim on the top. So she starts to cut my hair, and she cuts my top short and my sides short. My parents used to do this when I was little and I looked ugly AF. So she's done cutting my hair, and I look in the mirror and smile and say thanks. But my head legit looked like a freaking hairball a cat would cough up. Next story. My friend went to see her hairdresser, who is also her friend, to get her hair cut. They're chatting away, and the hairdresser was going to use the thinning scissors to get rid of some thickness, except she accidentally used the real scissors and cut off a pretty decent-sized portion of her hair. Next story. Usually, I just lurked on Reddit for years, but finally a thread made for me. So, taught myself how to cut hair in my early teens and 20s through YouTube and a fair amount of effing myself and the homies up. By this time, though, I was pretty decent, teaching my best friend, we'll call him D, how to cut hair in case the whole music thing he was doing didn't pop off. D texts me and asks if he can come over and use my clippers to cut his homie up who had just come in from out of state. Yeah, no worries, all good. D and 3 other dudes show up a few hours later, including this dude who wanted the cut. But bro, when I first saw this dude, I could tell he was effed up off of something, slurring his words, etc. And I had issues with substances in the past, and I'm not going to get in someone's business like that, so we didn't say anything. And we decided to do it in the garage since it was a night out, and it was nice, and setting him up right outside the stairs going inside, with our riding lawnmower in front of him. So he's set up like this: stairs, guy, lawnmower. Well, I take the bulk off this guy's head, putting in my bald line and balding everything out, then handing the clippers to D so he can do the fade and blend everything in. Well, dude keeps falling asleep while D is cutting him, and D's just tapping him on the shoulder, and we figure it's just whatever he was on, right? Halfway through D doing the fade on this dude, the guy's whole body slams forward, his whole head slamming the metal hood of the riding lawnmower, coming back up into the chair and starts having a seizure, shaking and sounds and everything. I wedge myself between D and this dude, putting my arms in a circle around him like if someone was trying to make a basketball hoop with their arms, making sure I don't touch the dude, but also making sure he doesn't fall over and give himself an impromptu rhinoplasty. The guy goes on for about 20 to 25 seconds like this and comes back, asking what happened, etc. The other dudes who had come with him told him what happened, and I basically told them they got a GTFO because nobody's dying on my property, especially not knowing this guy like that. So let D borrow my clippers for a few days so he can finish the cut somewhere else. Texts me the next morning after talking about it with the dudes and finishing the cut. Apparently, when coming from out of state, the guy we cut and his 2 friends had been crushing up Xanax and rolling it in their blunts and smoking it the whole trip. Actual idiots. SMH. Next story. I know the only people seeing this will be sorting by new, but I have my own F-up story. I'm a woman, and I had a mohawk for over a decade that I usually trimmed up myself. I worked in a hospital at the time, so I couldn't have the sides super short. Well, maybe I could, but the point is, it looked very model-esque on me, and that's how I could get away with having a mohawk at a hospital. But I had to keep it looking really femme. Then, one day, while trimming and polishing, I took the guard off the clippers to take care of the wispy bits at my nape, and when I went back to make sure the sides were even, I forgot to put the guard back on the clippers and mowed a 2.5 by 4 section of my hair completely down. I freaked out and went to my aunt who had a brilliant solution. she covered up the newly bald spot with brown eyeshadow. And it worked, and I never got in trouble for my hair for the 2 months it took to grow back. Alright guys, as promised, my personal haircut story. So I had a girlfriend at the time, relationship was kinda new. We had a date that day or the next day, I can't remember, but I get a haircut. And when I grow my hair out, it's just like I have a bit of curly hair, so it's just, it's a few inches. But anyway, I usually just get it short on the sides, long on the top. Like either I'll trim it on the top or leave it be at the top. So I go to Great Clips because I never got anything fancy. It was just simple, it always worked. But this lady, she screws up my cut. There is no fade. It's long, 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 short. Short, long, long, long. There's no transition. It's just like a bump. It's like just a spike of hair. It was the worst haircut I had ever received in my life. And like they tried fixing it, the lady, but I just left and I think I tipped. I have no self-respect sometimes. And it was so bad, I didn't want to take a picture to even laugh about it, and I was actually going to cancel the date. That's how bad the haircut was. So then I go around frantically searching for any nearby barbers in the area, and I call up this one Hispanic place, and I'm like, yo, can y'all help me? He's like, okay, come in. And he hangs up, and I'm like, okay. And I go in, guys, and this man does magic to my head and makes me look fresh, and I got, after 40 minutes or so, the best haircut I had ever received in my life. Guys, I'm serious when I say I got the worst and best haircut of my life in the same day. And that was over a year ago. And I still go to that same barber. I went there 2 days ago, and I'm looking fresh right now. I'm just saying, your narrator's hot. But they made me a lifelong customer that day because, man, I was like, wow, I have been missing out on the haircut and beard department because what the hell? I love the way I look now. I always do, but now I really do. But anyway, guys, that's your extra bonus story. But thank you all so much for watching, commenting, and have a good one. Bye-bye!